could say, oh, gee, if we came in the top 4 or 5. I'm looking to win everything. We want to run the table. We want to run it. Because that sends a signal. I start talking before you finish your applause. And you know why? Because I'm so excited, because we have so much potential. It's true. I don't want to wait for your frickin' applause. We have so much potential.
That was Donald Trump earlier today, wrapping up a 3-day swing through the early voting states in Iowa, New Hampshire, and then today in South Carolina. The Republican frontrunner called Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton his enemies and said he views the fight for the White House as a war. NBC's Hallie Jackson is live on Hilton Head Island. You always hear something new, Hallie, I guess, when you cover a Donald Trump event.
You know it, Steve. The other thing, you always hear sort of the stream of consciousness, right? Donald Trump is unlike other candidates in some ways in that he never uses a teleprompter. He just kind of riffs off his top of his head, riffs off the cuff. He'll talk about his polls. He'll talk about certain things that he always discusses, Jeb Bush, Hillary Clinton, for example, attacking them. But I want you to listen to this next soundbite because it's a sign of just how quickly Trump can shift from something very serious, like talking about his plan for ISIS or Mideast violence, to something like this. Listen.
He's got a problem with the carbon footprint. You can't use hairspray because hairspray is going to affect the ozone. I'm trying to figure out. Let's see, I'm in my room in New York City, and I want to put a little spray so that I can... Right? But I hear where they don't want me to use hairspray. They want me to use the pump. Because the other one, which I really like better than going bing, 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 and then it comes out in big globs, right? And you're stuck in your hair and you say, oh my God, I got to take a shower again. My hair's all screwed up. Right?
Steve, I have a can of hairspray just behind the camera if you'd like me to pick up a prop and kind of show you and explain what Trump is talking about. Listen, this is not going to become part of the Republican platform, but it's just, Trump being Trump. We say it all the time, and as you heard, the crowd loved it.
You're right. Definitely off the cuff. I can't think of a speechwriter out there who would write those lines. But look at that. The crowd loved it. You're right. Hallie Jackson in Hilton Head. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate that.
I'm Lauren Green, and you're in the strategy room. Donald Trump has gone after most of his GOP rivals during his race for the White House. But now he's turning his attention to Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton, slamming not only her, but also her husband, former President Bill Clinton. Trump even called Bill one of the great abusers of the world as he discussed the ex-president's extramarital affairs. Joining me from D.C. with more news from the campaign trail is Washington Examiner reporter Gabby Morangiello. Welcome, Gabby.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. So tell me about how Trump is attacking both Bill and Hillary. What's the strategy behind this?
Well, considering how valuable of an asset Bill Clinton is to his wife's campaign, it's actually pretty brilliant for Trump to be pursuing these attacks against him. Bill Clinton is currently out there stumping for Hillary Clinton. He's penning fundraising emails for her campaign. And meanwhile, Donald Trump, during his rallies and during media appearances, is, as you mentioned, saying that Bill Clinton is one of the greatest abusers of all time, labeling him as having a penchant for sexism, and really just driving home these scandals that riddled his presidency that really raised concerns to voters who are looking at Hillary Clinton, independent voters who are really questioning whether or not they're ready to support her. So it's a brilliant strategy on Donald Trump's behalf, and he's really acting now as though he's in a general election matchup with Hillary Clinton.
Very interesting because, this is not just, two campaign, people going at it. These are friends. They were friends. I mean, they've gone to each other's weddings. Their daughters, Ivanka and Chelsea, are friends. How is Clinton responding to all of this?
Well, the thing is, Clinton has welcomed a general election matchup with Donald Trump, but in the most recent weeks, when Trump has really pursued these attacks against her husband, she's gone silent. In 2 of her rallies this week, she did not mention Donald Trump at all, despite the fact that he has been levying these attacks against her pretty adamantly. And one thing that's interesting to point out, as you mentioned, is that, Donald Trump has been a friend to the Clintons in the past, and that's one area where this could backfire on him. He could look as though he's a hypocrite who, had the Clintons attend his wedding. He previously said in a blog post back in 2008 that Hillary Clinton would make a great president. So for him now to be pursuing these attacks against her and against former President Bill Clinton really could backfire on him.
Well, how long?
That's a possibility.
Yeah, and how long can we expect this to go back and forth? Because, he called Clinton theatrical. This is from a man who was a reality TV star. How long can we expect this to go back and forth?
Well, as we've seen with Donald Trump on the campaign trail so far, I mean, his attacks are incessant. He will go after somebody until he ensures that they are no longer attacking him. And perhaps that's what has happened now with Hillary Clinton in her, failing to mention his name in any of her rallies. But I really think that he's gearing up for a general election matchup. His campaign seems confident that he's going to be the Republican nominee, and they're readying themselves to go after Clinton even on these issues that really might hit home for her and her husband.
I mean, do you have any take of what voters actually think of all this? I mean, does anyone believe Trump has gone too far?
Well, I think some women look at this and say, they're welcoming Trump pointing out these, especially independent voters. But then again, it is important for a number of those in the millennial generation who grew up pretty unfamiliar with Bill Clinton's presidency to be reminded of some of these scandals and some of the questionable actions that occurred during his presidency and some of the questionable actions that have occurred thereafter with the Clinton family. So I think it's important for Trump to be highlighting these, and I wouldn't say that he's gone too far. As I said before, I think he's really gearing up for a general election contest with Clinton.
Very interesting stuff. All right, thank you very much, Gabby Morangiello. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And for more on the 2016 presidential race, check out foxnews.com. I'm Lauren Green, and thanks for watching.
We want to begin with the new developments in the 2016 race. Bernie Sanders is being punished by the Democratic National Committee this morning after allegations that at least one of his staffers improperly searched confidential data from the Hillary Clinton campaign. Now, in response to the breach, the DNC is now barring the Sanders campaign from accessing its database of Democratic voters. Now, that's an important resource that could prove crucial in early voting states like New Hampshire and Iowa. The move coming just one day before the third Democratic debate deals a potentially major blow to the Sanders campaign. Let's get right to it with NBC's Kristen Welker with the details. So, Kristen, first let's talk about how this happened.
Well, Tamron, here's what we know so far. According to the Democratic National Committee, it was a breach, and it happened on Wednesday when a computer glitch allowed people in Bernie Sanders' campaign to access a Democratic voters database. And it was just for a short period of time. They're stressing that. The DNC is immediately, as you pointed out, suspending the campaign's access to that critical voter information after accusing it of taking those improper steps. Now, on Wednesday, they say that's when this all started to unfold. Earlier today, a DNC official was on MSNBC. Here's what he had to say. Take a listen.
When we found out that one of the campaigns had inappropriately accessed some of the information, per the agreement in place under the use of this system, we are going through a process in which they're going to provide a full accounting so that we can restore their access to the voter file.
Now, the Sanders campaign has acknowledged the security breach and is blaming the software vendor for that glitch that temporarily allowed the access to the information. And they told me this in a statement, Tamron. They say, quote, the DNC is relying on an incompetent vendor who on more than one occasion has dropped the firewall between the various Democratic candidates' data. The vendor is calling this an isolated incident, adding that by lunchtime it was all resolved. Now, while the DNC says 4 people may have accessed the data, at this point, the Sanders campaign is holding one staffer responsible, firing that person. It is unlikely there's going to be a criminal investigation, but the DNC tells me they are investigating. We reached out to the Clinton campaign, and one official told me there is no comment at this point. But as you noted at the top, Tamron, there is a big debate tomorrow night, so this undoubtedly will be one of the top questions asked.
All right,
Tamron.
Thank you very much, Kristen Welker. And I'll get reaction from DNC Chair Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She will join us in just a few. But first, let's bring in MSNBC political correspondent and host Steve Kornacki for more on how this potentially could hurt Sanders in the final weeks before the first vote. So bottom line, let's talk about first when we say database and this information. As I understand it, this is information on voters, buying habits, consumer information, so that the campaigns can strategize how to reach these important voters. Is that the case, Steve?
Well, yeah, when you're the Bernie Sanders campaign and you are relying on a breakout showing in Iowa or New Hampshire, those first two states, it's all about grassroots outreach. It's all about personally identifying these voters, getting volunteers out there to talk to them, to motivate them, to get them out to the polls, to find out who they are. That's all the information you get from a file like this. To have that access shut off, if this turns into a long-term shutoff, this is a very bad timed thing from the Sanders campaign standpoint. In terms of where this race stands, I know it's been overshadowed, this Democratic race has, by the Republican race, but on the eve of this next debate, where the race stands, some fresh numbers for you. First of all, nationally, this just out this morning, Hillary Clinton maintaining basically a 2-to-1 lead over Bernie Sanders, 59 to 28% there. However, it is a different story when you look in those early states. New Hampshire, where this debate will be held tomorrow night. Take a look at this. Bernie Sanders actually still ahead. Newest poll from the Boston Herald, Franklin Pierce University up there in New Hampshire. Sanders with a 2-point lead over Hillary Clinton. That is down slightly from the last time, but nonetheless, he leads there. He is within striking distance in Iowa. He's down by about 10 points there. The saving grace for Hillary Clinton right now is, even though these numbers look a little shaky for her in the early states, the minute you get beyond the early states and you start polling states like South Carolina, in big states with much more diverse populations, she is overwhelmingly ahead of Bernie Sanders in those states. That is thanks largely to overwhelming support from African-American voters. That's something that Bernie Sanders has not been able to put a dent in so far. Turning now to the Republican race, too, just want to update you on developments there this morning. Donald Trump did one of those call-in interviews he's becoming famous for. He did one on Morning Joe this morning. The subject of Vladimir Putin came up. Vladimir Putin, who had some very nice words to say about Donald Trump the other day in Russia. He was asked about them, said some interesting things himself on Morning Joe.
Do you like Vladimir Putin's comments about you?
Sure. When people call you brilliant, it's always good, especially when the person heads up Russia.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, also as a person that kills journalists, political opponents, and invades countries. And invades countries. Obviously, that it would be a concern, would it not?
He's running this country, and at least he's a leader, you know, unlike what we have in this country.
Yeah, but again, he kills journalists that don't agree with him.
Well, I think our country does plenty of killing also, Joe, so, you know.
So that comment about Putin drawing a lot of ire from leading Republicans. Mitt Romney, just a few minutes ago, taking to Twitter to say this. I'll read it from my phone here. He said, important distinction. Thug Putin kills journalists and opponents. Our presidents kill terrorists and enemy combatants. That's Mitt Romney. Jeb Bush also weighing in quickly. He says a true freedom-loving conservative wouldn't be flattered by praise from a despot like Putin. Hashtag chaos candidate. So the Republican establishment not been friendly towards Vladimir Putin in the last few years. We will see how their comments go over in the wake of Donald Trump saying this. And just finally, new numbers on the Republican side as well up there in New Hampshire. Same Franklin Pierce poll this morning. Donald Trump, we can show you, more than a 2-to-1 lead over Ted Cruz, his nearest rival. So clearly in first place there. But the real story there is Rubio, Christie, Bush. You'd call them the establishment candidates. And look at that. The votes evenly divided among the three of them. The challenge for the establishment, if they want to stop Trump in New Hampshire, those three really need to coalesce somehow. Those voters will get around one of those candidates. You add those numbers together, it's enough to beat Trump. You keep them divided like that, Tamron.